All right, so we got a green light, so I'll call the June 14th, 2022 Lake Mills Public Works Board meeting to order. Misty, are you taking notes tonight?
I am.
Okay, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Picard?
Here.
Mr. Temperley?
Here.
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Mr. Polachek?
Here.
Mr. Reich? And Mr. Repplinger previously informed staff that he'd be unavailable for this evening's meeting.
All right, up next is the correction and approval of the minutes of May 10th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Greg.
You get that, Misty?
I did, thank you.
Okay, I'll need a roll call vote because I was gone.
Mr. Temperley?
Abstain.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Polachek?
Aye.
Mr. Picard?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Up next is questions and public comment. There's nobody here. I don't see anybody online.
Nobody else online.
All right, so we'll go to the director's report.
Okay, I've got a number of quick updates, I hope. First of all, the AMI project continues to move forward. Oops, I'm sorry.
Oh, you
Thank
might.
you, I got it. I apologize. You didn't miss anything. The AMI project continues to move forward slowly but surely. We still can't get chips for the water meters. So what we're doing right now is just installing those in new installations, new homes. But we get a promise every week that they'll be here next week. So eventually that week will show up. Staffing. We right now have 3 openings in the Department of Public Works. We just had one come open in the electric department. One of our linemen is going to Stoughton. And so we've already got an ad up for that position. And we still have 2 positions open in the wastewater treatment plant. These are proving to be very difficult to fill. So we have made some adjustments to our advertisements, and hopefully we can get some bodies there quickly. I will tell you that Bill and Ken are the only 2 working in the wastewater treatment plant right now. You know, because of their incredible talent, they can do that, but it becomes a little difficult when they have to be on standby every other weekend. So we've kind of pulled their social life away from them a little bit, but we continue to work on filling those spots. And in talking to my counterparts around the state, it's not uncommon. I mean, they're seeing similar things. What we're battling, I believe, is a combination of things. One is wages. You know, we're getting outwaged, if you will, in a number of places, and just the market pool for these positions is not real full right now. So we'll keep plugging away and we'll hope for the best. Now, on the flip side, we just started 3 young men, 3 people, 2 in the, 1 in the streets, 1 in the water, and then 1 was an interdepartmental employee. And all of them are doing really, quite honestly, exceptionally well. They're all young. I think the oldest one might be 21, but they're doing a really good job and real pleased with how that's going. Forgot to mention, we actually have 4 openings. We just had a gentleman resign in the streets department. So even as we're sitting here talking, they're dropping out. No, I'm just kidding. It's a concern. So we keep plugging away at that one. Electric rates. You've probably been seeing in the news that there's some concerns with not only electric rates, but rolling blackouts. So here's where we're at with WPPI. Right now, their power costs are about 9% over budget from 2020. They anticipate that it will go up about 17% over 2020.
1 in the streets, 1 in the water, and then 1 was an interdepartmental employee, and all doing really, quite honestly, exceptionally well.
Who's talking?
That was a replay of what Paul said.
That was me.
Oh,
You know, my wife talked about cloning me. What's happening?
That'd be a waste.
Oh, yeah, it would be. Maybe she wants a better me. Anyway, I don't know what that was. Okay, moving right along. So the fact that their costs are above budget does not mean that's a direct rate increase to consumers. What it means is then that PPI will make some adjustments, do their best to keep all that in check. And keep in mind that WPPI has what they call a rate stabilization fund. And that's a fund that every PPI member utility pays into every month, so that if rates start to really fluctuate dramatically, WPPI will incorporate some of that fund to keep the swings lower, to keep the overall increase as level as possible. As a comparison, we know that some of the investor-owned utilities are looking at somewhere in the area of 26% increase. And again, that doesn't mean it's going to be a straight 26% every month. You know, consumers will see maybe 80% of that. So there will be probably double-digit increases in the price of power for investor-owned utilities, but we'll have to see what happens.
And this will show up in the PCAC?
Very good, yes. I was just going to mention, that's how this is passed along. These are power cost adjustments. And so what we will see more than likely is a positive PCAC, I'm going to guess, or what we've been told is at least through September.
And this is caused by natural gas cost and other things like that?
You're just feeding them right to me. Yeah, it's a combination of factors. There was an incredibly high demand for natural gas in April, which is very unusual, but that's driving part of that. There is a shortage of generating capacity in what's called the MISO. That's the Midwest Independent System Operators. And that's a multi-state group of generating plants. And there's a shortage of generating capacity, and there's a shortage of transmission capacity. And so that's driving these costs too. And what is driving, or what is causing the shortage of generation plants, is that summer is typically the time when coal-fired plants especially are shut down for repair. And these are repairs that are scheduled literally a decade in advance, and so they have to be done. So that's where the concerns about the rolling blackouts is coming from. Now, WPPI has sufficient resources to avoid that. It's when those resources get into the market and possibly get used up that there might be an issue. And I don't totally understand how MISO works, but if it's your resource, you get first use of that resource. So what we've been told right now by WPPI is that they don't anticipate any kind of brownouts or anything like that. Now, just to kind of hedge that bet a little bit, Lake Mills is participating in a pilot program. It's called the Emergency Curtailment Program. And it's purely voluntary. And what it is just contacting businesses, homeowners, and asking if they'd be willing to participate in this program. And what happens is if there is a need to curtail load, they get an email, and they've already been given instructions on, you know, don't do your laundry that night, or for a commercial business or something like that, if you can turn your thermostat up. But there's a whole list of things that they're asked to do to participate in this voluntary program. And again, it's a pilot, so I think there's 4 utilities across the state that are doing it just to see if it actually will have an effect. So all that together kind of reinforces what you're probably seeing in the newspapers and in the news, that prices are going up. And if anybody hasn't noticed that yet, then you're not paying attention. But we don't anticipate a huge spike, and we right now don't anticipate any kind of brownouts or just not having enough power to do what everybody wants to do. And,
Mr. Hermanson?
and the caveat I have to offer there is that could change at any time.
Paul, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I just was curious, is our investment, or WPPI's investment in solar energy, does that also help kind of protect us from some of those swings in prices in the market?
It does, but not to a great extent. Both wind and solar have such dramatic limitations on when they can be used that what we were told by PPI is they really don't even figure that in this case, because it's just not a resource they can that's as consistent as coal or gas or something like that. But sure they have some effect, without a doubt. All right. Anything else on that one? I'm just full of good news tonight. I do have good news. PFAS. As you know, we did a voluntary test of PFAS at all of our reservoirs, all of our wells, and our results came back so low that they were below the level of detection. And so that's very good news for us right now that we don't have a PFAS issue. You've probably heard or seen that there are a couple of cities that have shut down wells and that sort of thing. We don't have to do that. And the information we got from the DNR that at this time, again, that's that caveat, at this time, there will be no further action on our part in regard to PFAS. Latest I heard today is that it sounds more and more like the MCL, the minimum concentration level, will be 70 parts per billion. The lowest detection point is less than 1 part per billion. And again, all of our tests were so low that we didn't even reach the detection level. Good news. Last thing I've got done on this list is security. We've talked about this a few times, but a new event that's come up is we are working with the police department and the parks department, looking at a camera system that would take 24-hour surveillance of all of our water reservoirs, water tower, substation, buildings, et cetera. So you will be seeing something in this regard in the capital improvement plan for 2023. So we are taking some positive steps in this regard. And that is what I have.
On the AMI, you've got 2 requests to not have AMIs. We discussed that over, you mentioned it at in the April meeting.
Yeah,
And we exchanged emails.
We have one specific request to not install one. And then we also have a request from a family that has a young child. And we're still working with them on, what we're doing is not installing those right away until they get more information on how this may be affecting their child. Apparently the child is getting headaches. Our understanding is right now that since we haven't put the AMI meter in, it hasn't had any, the child hasn't had more headaches. Am I saying that? Am I making sense there? I'm kind of jumbled up. But it doesn't seem like there's a correlation between the two.
Right. Okay.
So that's all we've gotten so far for requests to not install.
So if we don't install them, we have spare resource to check your meters.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, if we're not going to install the AMIs, right?
Oh.
We're going to have to send somebody out.
Well, right now, we don't have an opt-out policy. So what we're doing is just saving this particular one till later.
Right,
when we
okay.
get more of them installed, to see if there are more.
Okay, all right.
But we still will install the meter. It's just we're waiting a little bit on this particular one.
Okay.
And I should tell you what we're doing in the meantime. The concern is the EMF. And so we have purchased a Gauss meter, it's called. That's what you use for measuring EMF. And doing some testing on the meters, and it's not meeting the threshold. You know, there are appliances and cell phones that are much more intense, so.
A cell phone is much more intense.
Yeah, and then given its location.
Yeah.
Makes it a real issue. So we're going through that process. We're doing our due diligence to make sure that what we're telling people is legitimate and appropriate, and, yeah. So again, we have one official one so far.
Okay.
May I just have a follow-up on the PFAS issue?
Sure.
One question and one comment. The comment first, I believe I heard on the radio this morning that the final legislative committee has concluded their review of the PFAS rule, and I think it will be 70 parts per million in the drinking water. That standard is going to go into effect. So I think that process is done, is what I thought I had heard today. And then just a question on, I've gotten a couple of constituent questions over the last year or so about PFAS in the city's drinking water. Are you thinking to promote or, educate people about the fact that the city's test results, I guess, or what do you recommend that we tell people if they inquire.
Sure, thank you. We did send a news release to the newspaper, and it's posted on the websites right now. We've talked a little bit about if there's other information we should do, like should we do a mailer to everyone, that sort of thing. The DNR is actually, they kind of leave it up to us as to how we want to do it, but, so we'll see. I mean, if we get a lot of reaction or a lot more questions than we think we're covering by our sources, the newspaper and the websites or something, then we can do a mailer or something. I think it's good news, so it's something we should probably promote as much as we can.
Definitely. Well, thanks for what you've already done, and then I can just refer people who've called me to those sources.
Yeah, thanks. We're real pleased with the results.
All right, any more questions on the director's report? Then we'll move on to item 6, presentation on water quality. We're going to have a guest speaker or somebody in here going to give that? Oh, it's Paul.
Yes, Paul.
I'm all you got, Todd. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know if there's something,
No, let me explain what's
All right.
happening here. And Dave, if you'd be so kind as to put this up, the presentation up. Excuse me. We got a request from the city council to do a presentation on water quality. And so as we were putting this together, we thought this is good information for you guys to have also. And what we did is basically took the presentation that we gave you on rates, the deep dive presentation on rates and that sort of thing, and added that to this presentation so that when we go to the city council, we'll also go through more specifically many of the things we talked about during the deep dive. So what I'm going to do with this presentation, if it's all right with you, is kind of zip through some of the slides that you guys have already seen and then get more into the water quality stuff. And I'll tell you straight up, I can summarize this real quick. Our water quality is excellent. And I can say that because we have to do a lot of testing, and there was a document in your packet with all the testing that we have to do. It's an everyday thing, and that's 7 days a week. Very extensive, and that has to be published in what's called the Consumer Confidence Report, the CCR. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but overall, the quality of the water in Lake Mills is very good. So Dave, if you want to advance, and I'll just keep telling you, you can advance that one. You probably saw this one last time. You'll notice that we have one more employee, Connor Rosenmeyer, has joined us. So he's been there less than a month. So right now in our water department, we have about 11 years and a month worth of experience. But every day they're getting smarter. So, okay, Dave. You saw this one before. Okay, Dave. Same one, Dave. This one I want to stop on just for a second. This is the 2021 data. In the presentation we gave to you, we only had the 2020 data. So you'll notice that at the end of 21, our net operating income was $628,000. The year before, it was a negative $23,000. But I want to point out, if you look at 19 and 18, it's very common for our net operating income to fluctuate pretty dramatically every year. Basically, 20 was down by so much because we did all of the water tower painting and that sort of thing. So every year is going to fluctuate quite a bit. But 21 was a good year. This is something that I didn't show you last time, and I was going to, and then I forgot to, but it's the property tax equivalent, or what we call a pilot, and that's payment in lieu of taxes. Because we're a nonprofit organization, we don't pay property taxes, if you will. But instead, we pay this pilot, and this is money that's paid directly to the city. And so you see that those are the last 5 years of pilot payments that the water utility has made to the city. And I would tell you the electric utility does the same thing. It's a little bit more than this, but that's money that goes right to the general fund. All right, Dave, thank you. That hasn't changed a lot. Thank you, Dave. I think you saw this one. This is the water loss. If you remember seeing this, we had problems with water loss. This is a little different view of the aging main chart that we had last time, but it's a little more graphic. But again, we've got some old mains we're looking at. Thank you, Dave. Threw in a pipeline span slide here just to show you how long this stuff is supposed to last. Of course, the joke around the shop is that I am almost up to the 120 years that some of that stuff is supposed to last. We talked about this, putting things in context, small versus large utilities. The reason that there's two times more main breaks in small utilities versus large utilities, or at least the perception is that the larger utilities have more money and tend to have a more aggressive replacement plan. But otherwise, that's information from a study done by Utah. Go ahead.
So I looked at this study that was referenced here, and it mentioned that PVC had less than half the breakage rate of ductile iron and a lower total cost of ownership.
Yeah, the new stuff. And so we're actually starting to use that.
Yeah,
One
well,
of the-
there's PVC, and the newest stuff, the HDPE, was such a small percentage that they didn't break that out separately.
Correct.
In that 2018 study.
Correct. And so we are starting to use more of that.
Yeah.
You got it.
So
Okay.
it breaks less, but does it last as long?
Well, they don't know.
They don't know. Oh, because it's so new?
This hasn't been around 100 years yet.
Oh, all right.
Theoretically, it should, but we'll see.
Theoretically.
Yeah. What happens to it, or at least the older stuff, is that it starts out round, and then when you put the weight of the soil, it what's the word?
Eggshells.
Eggshells. So it doesn't stay round, and it puts high stress on the outside of it and stuff. So we'll see. I mean,
It doesn't break in the same fashion that the other mains do. So when it eggshells, it breaks along that one edge. And it breaks long
Yeah.
instead of around or popping holes, which is what the other water mains do.
but I guess, go ahead, Steve.
So it's really hard to find water main leaks in a PVC. And if you don't install PVC properly or bed it properly, it tends to be very difficult. So we've historically looked at, because we don't spend as much time on certain types of watching it being installed, it's just easier to leave it as ductile iron. Plus you have a solider base for your service laterals and those types of things.
Of course, now there is a shortage of ductile iron, and so we are putting plastic, if you will, plastic pipe on Oak Street this year. So we'll have a good test area there. Okay, Dave. This one you've seen. Next one, please. I don't know if you saw this, just refers to the operator. Operator's misspelled. I see that now, so I'll fix that. But the point here is not only do we do a lot of tests, but we have to have a person that knows how to do this. So they have to be certified by the DNR, and then they have to have continuing education and that sort of thing. So, okay, Dave, thank you. This just refers to the water testing requirements. Okay, so the Consumer Confidence Report, or the CCR, it's required by the EPA annually. We have to file it annually. And it lists, and I want to say this so it makes sense, so help me out here, Dwayne. It lists only the contaminants that were detected in the test. So in other words, there's a whole list of contaminants, but if we didn't detect it in our test, they don't show up in the Consumer Confidence Report. So what I'll be showing you in a little bit is just what shows up on the test. Overall, we are in compliance with the drinking water rules, and we will be doing more education. Or the Consumer Confidence Report serves as an educational tool for people to go and check out what their water is like. So that's the CCR. So we'll start with this. On all of the graphs, you're going to see the blue line indicates the MCL. So that's the maximum contaminant level. Thank you. I've said that a million times. So when you see the blue lines, those are the ones we want to stay below. So on this graph, there's actually two different things being shown. Again, these are chlorine residuals, and I should back up and explain that. We do put chlorine into the water. And we do want to make sure by doing our testing at various sites away from where the chlorine enters the system that we still have chlorine out there, but we don't want to have too much. And so what this graph shows is that we are seeing our appropriate chlorine residual levels. They're well below the MCL, but they're high enough to show that the chlorine is reaching the entire system. Okay, Dave? Thank you. Radioactive contaminants. Scary word, but there's radioactive material all over the earth. We had an issue 2 years ago where the radium-226 and 228 had exceeded the MCL, and that's set up on a running average. So in other words, it's a year average. So go ahead, Dwayne. Four-quarter average.
Four-quarter average?
Four-quarter average. So it's not like this is what we tested in 1 month. It's the average for a year period. Am I saying that so you guys understand? Yeah.
It's an average of 4 measurements taken over a
Thank
year.
you. Thank you, Mark. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what it is. So we did exceed that a couple years ago where the MCL is 5, and we went to, the running average number was 5.5. So if you recall, this was at well 4, and what we did is realized that the radioactivity was coming from the bottom part of the well. So we simply abandoned that, filled it in, sealed it up, and as you can see, our radium levels have dropped significantly. Again, it's something that occurs naturally. We were able to mitigate that really quickly and quite inexpensively.
Does the 2020 data here represent the well fix for the whole year, or is it a partial fix for the year?
Partial. It is partial. Wouldn't be for the full year.
So for 2021 should look, cross your fingers, even better.
Yeah, and the test results we're seeing, and we do this monthly, the test results we're seeing, they're all staying low.
Yes.
So yes, it appears that our fixes worked quite well. Okay, thank you. Barium, again, same story. The MCL is the blue line. The amount that we're seeing or detecting is the brown line, well below the MCL. Fluoride, same thing as chlorine. We do put fluoride in the water. We want to make sure it gets to the entire system, but fluoride in too high a concentration is very unsafe. Again, we're well below the MCL on fluoride.
Question about
Sure.
that. So I think Waterloo just got rid of their fluoride program.
Just got rid of it? Did you say, Todd?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was Waterloo. Some,
Not all cities treat to put fluoride in their water.
That's correct, and that's a city's decision to do that, and so they can or they can't, and that, if the decision was made to not do it, so be it.
all right,
So that is a decision.
okay.
Yep. Same story on nickel, again, very low, but we did have some detection, but it's well below the MCL. Now, arsenic is something that now is tested for, starting 2020, it's tested for. Again, we did not have any detection on it. My understanding is that a line for arsenic is always going to show up in the CCR, even if you had nothing there. It's one of these issues that has crept to the top, and so the DNR is, or excuse me, the EPA is requiring that we show how much, if any of that was detected. Nitrates is one that's always a concern for people, and we do test for this every year. The last time we had any detected level was in 2016, and there it was well below the MCL. Lead and copper rule, this one's a little different. This is why we're replacing lead service lines in the city. The first rules actually came out in 1991, and then in 2014, Flint occurred, and that really drove this thing. And I will just reiterate, we are not Flint. We do not have lead in the water. We have lead service lines that may allow lead to leach into the system, excuse me, not into the system, but into the service line, and that may affect individual homes. So again, that's why it's plumbing materials that contain lead, not our water supply. We went through a lengthy process, I believe, since about 2017, where we, for a while, had to take 40 samples twice a year. This is 40 different locations. After getting rid of enough service lines, et cetera, we were lowered to 20. And right now, we are not required to test any. And so what we're doing in lieu of that, if you will, we're looking at, actually, we just got the final order hours ago to change our corrosion control. In other words, the chemicals that we put into the system to keep lead and copper from leaching into the system. We're changing our mix. It's an orthophosphate, they call it. We'll have more information on that later. But they're changing our mix in hopes of continuing to have low leaching rates in our system. So that will actually we have to have that in place by the end of this year. So I'll get you more information on that as it progresses.
Can I just ask, are we changing from one type of chemical to another, or are we changing from one type of chemical to a mix of the existing chemical and another?
Same chemical, different concentrations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we used to use what's called a 70-30, 70% ortho, thank you. And so now what the DNR has asked that we go to 50-50, so we've got a balance of ortho and phosphates.
So I think of that as a tweak to the recipe to just make that cake rise a little bit better.
Exactly, exactly. And we don't want to add so many phosphates that then Bill has to take them out of the treatment plant, which is a concern. So, excuse me, we're going 50-50, so it's just like you say, a tweak there. Thank you. Okay, Dave. We were set up with consent orders from the DNR basically say thou shalt do this now. And so we did, and these started basically in 2016, and they are all completed. We have conformed with everything that the DNR has asked us to do. The result of the consent orders, and this is a big deal, is that we did take a citywide LSL inventory, so we're quite confident, we know where every LSL line is in the city, and this is something that a number of other cities are now doing because it works so well for us, and so the DNR is requiring this in a number of other cities. It reduced our sample requirement, which also reduced cost. It did prompt, as you can see there, 178 residential LSL replacements, and then 173 on our side of the LSL. We did a lot of education. We adjusted our corrosion control, took care of the radium issue, and generally what we did is improved the water system through this. So I will tell you straight up, it was a real difficult process to go through all the consent orders with the DNR. I called them some bad names. I apologize for that now, because overall, it improved our water system. Absolutely no doubt about it. You saw the rate comparisons. This one's an update. The range has changed a little bit from when we looked at this. And I changed this assumption to 300 gallons a month, which is more in line with an average residential rate or residential usage. Still, we're high. But we're in the ballpark. We are seeing more utilities are having to file rate increases for the LSLs and that sort of thing. So, okay. Let's see, you saw this one, just how we, want to kind of be careful about rate comparisons. You saw this one. I think, Dave, you can probably zip through a lot of these because they're really, oh, stop with that one. If you would go back one, Dave, thank you. One thing we wanted to add to the water quality presentation is a couple of common complaints that we get. One is brown water. And without a doubt, brown water is unpleasant, but it is safe. Basically, it's just sediment. It's iron and manganese that, for whatever reason, is being shaken loose from the system. It could be when there's a water main break. It can be when somebody shuts a fire hydrant too fast, stuff like that. And so every once in a while, we will get brown water. And so this is where it comes from, basically. Some of it can be in the home. More than likely, the majority of it comes from the system. Excuse me. Again, it's safe, and it does stain, and so we encourage people not to necessarily wash their whites in this water, but it is safe. Okay, Dave. And then the other one is the water smells like chlorine, as we talked about. We add chlorine for sanitation. We are required to do that one. And actually, this is a minor point, but what people are actually smelling are chloramines, and that's just as the chlorine working. So if you go to a swimming pool and you think you can smell chlorine, what you're smelling is the chlorine is working. And so there's a couple of factors that come into this, how far a house may be from a treatment location, and generally, the farther away you are, the more intense the smell is going to be, because again, it's the chlorine breaking down. Because our water stays at about 55 degrees, the chlorine tends to stay in suspension a little bit longer. Every once in a while, we haven't done it for quite some time, we may overchlorinate. That's typically the result of a malfunction of a meter. And then one of the other problems is when we have stagnant water or we have dead-end lines, and we try to avoid those. We try to make sure we loop those so the water keeps moving. But there are a few places in town where there's a fire hydrant, and then that's the end of the line. And so people may have that chloramine smell there also. Again, our limits have not exceeded the MCLs, and so it's another one of these things that it doesn't smell good, but it's safe. We talked about these, I think, at last time. So these are the regulations. We're looking at more on lead, PFAS we may be done with for a little while, radium security supply, et cetera. And then these are, again, are the future issues we're looking at. Okay, Dave. These are always our goals: safe, clean water, affordable, complete the LSL replacements. We're hoping to have that done by next year. That's not going to happen, but we're going to keep plugging away at that. And, of course, the upgrades. These we've talked about too. Thank you, Dave. So that's the presentation. Again, the whole thing will be presented to the council. Greg, we'll go through every single one of those. But for your benefit, the water quality stuff was the main issue there. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Very pleased to be able to present a report like that, let me tell you. So hats off to our water crew.
Any other questions or comments or concerns? I always thought the water tastes good.
This is Lisa. I just thought I would add, if you can weave in the recent results from the PFAS when you present this to the council, I think that's just one more place that you can, share that positive. And like you said, that probably means, there's not going to be any regulatory effect on this city.
Absolutely, we'll be doing that, Lisa. Yep.
All right, we're going to the next agenda. Item number 7, discussion and recommendation on designated biking trail connecting Brookstone to downtown.
Okay, one more and then I'll shut up. Is that all right? Or you can jump in. I say everybody's still awake. That's impressive. All right, this comes to us via the council and via Greg, who got a request to look at a bike route from the east side, from the Brookstone area to the downtown area. And I will summarize this whole memo by saying that we looked at pros and cons, obstacles and positives, and decided that before we make a recommendation, we need a lot more input from you. And so what we did is took some snippets from the bicycle plan. We also sent you a copy of the bicycle plan to go through. And if you go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th paragraph, I guess it is. And toward the
plan
bottom.
or the memo?
I'm sorry, what?
On the plan or the memo?
I'm sorry, in the memo. I apologize. Toward the end of that memo, there's a sentence that begins, some things to consider when studying this request. And so that really is the crux of the memo, or the what we'd like to discuss with you tonight, and that is, how do you want to proceed? Where do you think this falls in the priorities? And maybe, given that the bicycle plan is from 2005, maybe we want to look at the whole plan overall, and rather than getting into a piecemeal situation where we look at, requests and that sort of thing, maybe it's not a bad idea to just really take a look at the entire plan and make sure that what's in there is still workable and appropriate and all that stuff, with the understanding that we still want to respond to the request to find a good route from the Brookstone area to downtown.
Okay, so, well, why do people need help in that? I mean, if they don't want to ride on County B, they can go down.
Do you have any additional details on the request, what the concern was?
Go ahead.
I think the request, at least in my opinion, when I read it, it looked like it was a request for more of an experienced rider having a direct route from the east side of the city to downtown. For that experienced rider. I think the question that Paul and I faced as we looked at different options is, are we providing a route specifically for that experienced driver, or should we be looking at routes that are providing it may be a family type or the inexperienced rider as well, or instead of that route? I guess I can continue. There are a number of routes, whether marked or not, throughout the city. In fact, from the Brookstone area, there's a trail along American Way, which is independent of the street, which then also connects to the Spur Trail, which ultimately connects to the Drumlin Trail, which connects to South Main Street, which actually has bike trails marked on it already. Again, there is a route to get there, albeit somewhat circuitous and quite a ways around, rather than just that direct route from Brookstone to downtown. And so I think what Paul and I are asking is the approach that we should be looking at focusing just on that experienced rider and that direct route or direct routes throughout the city, in and out of the city? Or should we be looking at routes that are maybe more friendly to a larger group of potential riders? Is that fair in statement?
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add, and I think this goes to your point, Todd, is should we be designating routes at all, given that really any street is a route?
Well, I don't need to be told to use South Ferry Drive as an alternate to South Main. I just do it because I just don't like South Main. So, and, I mean, I've biked out to the industrial park, and so you don't feel like going to County B, you just go down Water Street and hit Jefferson and kind of snake your way over to American Way, where we do have a bike path.
And Highway B does have paved shoulders that are striped, right? All the way to Brookstone, correct?
In the county area.
Yes.
And I would think that, and I would have to ask and defer that to Brian at the county, but I believe that's not designated as a bike route. It's just designating the paved shoulder.
Yes, yes, which, like it states here, does it have to, should it, does a sign saying it's a designated bike route, a paved shoulder has a lot of benefit for a bicycle as well as.
Correct.
Whether it's a designated bike route or not.
Some of the other things, if I may, that we, go ahead.
Can we let Lisa, she wanted to comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa.
Oh, thank you. A couple things. One, I thought it's interesting that the plan talks about different ways that a street can be more bike friendly, if you will, without doing that formal designation, just even in terms of painting the white lines, between the curb and the center line, somewhere that kind of draws attention to a shoulder, so to speak. So that seems like that's a technique that could be used in some situations. I was curious about the plan itself, that it's 18 years old. How much of it is already done? It struck me as I read through it that I think most of it is probably not in place the way that it was written in the plan. And so then that kind of made me wonder, would it be worth updating the whole thing and then prioritizing, what to spend the money on in the near future?
You have to go up there to hear you, Greg. Yeah. I'll be dictator and just suspend the rules.
I just wanted to clarify real quick that the memo may not have outlined it as well as it should have, but it was a family request, and the concern was for children's safety, actually. So they were looking for a route for families from Brookstone area to get down to the downtown so they can do shopping, visit the library, maybe even an extension to get to the schools, things like that. So it was a family request.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And
Bet.
maybe what Paul and I were confusing is there may be another second request from late last fall. That request was more direct. And so I apologize if there's some confusion there. So it appears we have two requests, one of each type. So thanks for clarifying. Thus brings the question for Paul and I, again, is how should we approach each of these? Some of the things that, and if I may, some of the things that we battled with a little bit is if it is a bike route on Lake Street, potentially, which is the most direct route, it also then means countering that with removing parking. In order to leave the street width the way it is in its width, by placing 2 bike lanes on that street with the given width, it means that parking is being eliminated. So there are some consequences to certain bike routes in certain locations.
And how protective is that white stripe? Because I found articles, to really make it safe, you need a barricade, like downtown Chicago did. Cars would definitely stay away from. And there's also the argument that if you paint a white stripe, cars will purposely drive as close as possible to that white stripe. Or if there isn't one, they kind of go to the left even further without the white stripe. But the white stripe is telling them, well, you can get closer to these bicyclists. There's really no definite science between stripe lanes decreasing accidents. I mean, barricaded, yes. Dedicated bike paths, but we're not like Madison or Fort where we have abandoned rail tracks going through town where we can take advantage of that. And to try to retrofit a dedicated bike path in existing neighborhoods is going to even be a worse nightmare than sidewalks.
I would agree that the safer route is the off-street route.
Right.
And really in the industrial park and the Drumlin Trail and some of the old railroad
Right.
spurs, we already have some of those routes.
Jefferson
established.
Street just, I mean, other than school, I mean, on weekends, it's dead. Same thing for Water Street. So.
Correct. Or
I've taken that many times just to avoid County B, during rush hour. Or,
and I would say that Guile Street is even wider than
Yeah.
Water Street.
right.
I apologize if I interrupted you.
No,
I
I don't mind, bantering, but
But my thought is I think we should update the plan.
with who's talking?
Greg,
What was
This
your
is
question? Yeah?
It's not a question, it's just an opinion. It's my thought is that we should update the bike plan. The city should update the master bike plan.
So I'm going to follow on with what Lisa said about there's a lot of stuff in this bike plan that did not get done. And if we're going to have a bike plan that's updated, I don't want to have an updated bike plan just to have it sit on the shelf.
Yeah, we've got so many studies on file right now for rec facilities that are going nowhere. And if you look at the date of the bike plan, 2005, what happened in 2006 and 2008 was the tax levy limits. There's just no money. So how much are we prepared to borrow for this?
Well, it seems to me
Well,
it's
I mean-
valid to update the plan, even if you don't know how you're going to pay for it, but
I'm
it
opposed to
would
that.
also be, but I mean, you still want to say, this is our vision, like this is where we would like to have the community go, and then pay for it over time, but you don't want to have something that's unrealistic. And I wonder, based on the age of this plan, and I'm not aware that too much of it is done other than maybe South Main, that maybe, like Greg said, it's maybe due to be updated to something that is, that would have the intention of being implemented.
So how much are we going to spend to update the plan?
well, I don't know.
I-
I will tell you that what's happening here is exactly what we did, where that's why we had so much discussion, and that's why we thought, let's get some direction from you all. The cost to update the plan, I think, would be minimal, what I guess I envision is more discussion here, some public input, maybe a 6-month or 12-month process where we just take a good close look at this, we bring it up at this meeting regularly, kind of a strategic plan, just the bike plan purpose, or a portion of a strategic plan. And I think from that standpoint, doing that wouldn't be really expensive. Now, what's plugged into the plan may have some dollars attached to it. Our quick research on that, is that there's not a great deal of cost to painting the white line and putting up the signs and that sort of thing. But there may be other costs, like Dwayne was alluding to, of losing parking, that sort of thing. And so I guess I'm kind of dancing around the question here, but I don't think the cost to update the plan itself, the piece of paper with the words on it, would be all that expensive. But what goes into the plan might have some financial issues.
I like to see the numbers on that. I mean, we've done a lot of studies in the city for projects that have gone nowhere.
So this is Greg again. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's hard to, I can't raise my hand on the phone, but
That's right.
I don't mean to be rude and interrupt, but even though the plan may be outdated, it would be, and many things in that may not have been implemented, it would be nice to know whether or not the things that have not been implemented are still of the current. Some of those concerns may have gone away and they may no longer be valid. So that's why I'm thinking it would be good to update the plan. Is some stuff has probably changed. There's even new people, new residents, new needs. So I think we should update it and see what you can throw out, what you don't need to do, and maybe there's some new routes that need to, like we just said, are considering Brookstone to the downtown. Maybe there's some new routes that should be considered. So that's why we should update it.
I wonder if we could address your concern, Todd, about the cost with maybe having a preliminary step. Could we have someone from staff just, give us a memo summary of what in the current plan has already been completed? So that, and then that gives, and then that can be on a future agenda. So as you said, Paul, we could discuss this again in a future agenda, and then can say, okay, well, are some of these other items a priority, or will they fit into, some project that we have coming in the next 2, 3, 5 years? Or are there some things that are really out of date because of the way that our city has developed?
Well, why is that? Well, that's our job to do that. So we could just work on the plan, the Public Works Board. We did that sidewalk plan back in '98. We didn't have staff do that. It was amateurish, but.
And then that plan, like this plan, changes.
Yeah.
The priority of what to do changes based upon funding and other considerations.
Yeah.
Some of this, Dwayne and Brandon are meeting with Dustin as part of the comprehensive plan to go over what has been done.
Well, we can do that ourselves with a map. We don't need to hire people to do that for us.
Well, it's already part of the comprehensive plan that they're doing, so they were already going to meet with them and go over what's been done, and then that becomes part of the conversation for the Public Works Board and the Plan Commission and the public. So it's working that way. Some of the items are more significantly further along. I think the water one is probably a lot further along. The streets one has come a long way in the last 8 years, but obviously we have done some bike work, like in the industrial park and on South Main Street, but it's still a long ways out. We also ran that one down to St. Paul's, and you have that one down along there. So it's not like we haven't done anything. It's been more like Mark said. It's when the funding becomes available and when the public is ready for it.
Those are undeveloped though. I mean, that's easy peasy, undeveloped. We're talking how do we navigate through developed streets where we don't have a railroad right of way or get people to agree to give up.
Yeah, obviously if it's all built up, there's limitations to what you can do, but you can still do something. And I'd like just to mention something that's happened relatively recently, and that's on the south side, the Unshaven area, where there was some concern, which I raised, about bike traffic to the park south of there. And we do not have any bike lanes or anything on that road, Mud Lake Road. And that was a conscious decision. And I've proposed that we have limited parking, not 24-hour-a-day parking along that street, which I understand is feasible, but not legally feasible, not practical at this point in time to put in place. But that's just an example of how bicycle planning occurs here sometimes.
Any planning.
When you looked at the bike trail plan, though, the bike trail came down Ferry and across and then down a different route and then came over, and that's one part of the conversation we had when we were talking about that, Mark. So it did call for some bike routes there, but it was a little bit further to the west.
So this 2000 whatever plan didn't go that far south. It ends north of Sandy. Well, it ends at the bike trail, at Glacial Drumlin Trail.
No, there should be more. Apparently someone didn't get the full picture because there's a bigger one.
Well, I'm looking at the last 2 pages of this 2005 bicycle plan, location of proposed improvements, possible Lake Mills bike route system, and there is nothing south of the Glacial Drumlin Trail.
That's the only plan I could find, so if there's a different one, then
No, I think Mark's point is the plan changed.
Sure.
We added something that was not in the plan.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
Mark?
yeah, we
Yeah.
added subdivision, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's out of date, I guess is the bottom line, as far as anticipating everything that was going to happen if it's incorporated into the plan. That's why I offer the suggestion of maybe we should review this thing and see what's been done, what hasn't, what should be added, et cetera.
And my general impression of this plan is it's more than the city was willing to do. So let's not do another plan that's more than the city is willing to do. Let's get some city council and public works board input to the plan makers before the plan is made.
I'm sorry. And I think that's where Paul and I were headed today, was here's a plan that's 18 years old, and some things have been implemented by previous councils, and should we be looking at implementing exactly what's in this document moving forward, and we should start that discussion. Is that fair to say what Paul and I were trying to do today?
Yes, yes. Now,
If I remember correctly, though, Strand did the study, and you were involved, and we were here at Public Works Board and City Council presenting those plans. So it wasn't like it wasn't brought up before.
Yeah, I guess the point is, it's time to review it. It's X number of years old, let's take a look at it.
now,
And again, I think we can do that in-house. I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
now I'm going to say, in this city, the buck stops with the city council, not the public works board. Virtually everything at the public works board level is a recommendation to the city council. So, and the city council has better visibility than we do on budgets and priorities citywide. So I think the city council needs to be involved as well, in my opinion.
And I think we wanted to start with this board.
Yeah.
I mean, we should start looking at the bigger picture too, because we have outstanding recommendation on the yard waste facility, and I don't know where that's at. According to the headlines, the council canceled that, so.
I wouldn't go that far, but
Oh.
they definitely slowed it down.
Yeah, so why ramp up a bike plan when they ramp down a yard waste? I mean, yard waste is higher priority. We have to have a yard waste. So,
I
And
think
again, that's why
I'll
we're
do-
talking to you. Go ahead.
Just all due respect, I think they're sort of two different, it's a little bit apples and oranges, because we have a bicycle plan. It's dated. As a newer council member, I wasn't aware of it until this meeting, so it's not something that you can readily find on the web pages. You have to maybe have had some history of being involved with it to know that it exists, and then to know, what it says and what the recommendations are. So in my opinion, I do think it's a good idea to refresh it and make sure that the council's aware of it. And I guess, and I guess, I don't know who's this is a question for, Steve or Paul, but it seems to me the Public Works Board is within their authority to say, we'd like to revisit this plan. And we recommend, updating it, or we'd like to ask the staff to give us a report on how much is completed. I don't think we need the council to direct that, but I guess I'm curious what other people think.
This is Greg. I've got another thought. I would like to see how the comprehensive plan, dovetails into an updated bike plan. Perhaps there's some clues in the public comment section of the comprehensive plan that was recently concluded that could be incorporated into an updated bike plan.
Well, the comprehensive plan was to do what we've been talking about as far as refreshing, because it was going to sit and meet with certain public works people and say, okay, what's done, what's still out there, and is there anything that we need to change before it goes to public review. So the question that you're asking is, like the discussion on the bike trail, not a lot of it's been done. So there's going to be some refreshing to it, but not a lot. Then the question is going to be, what do we need to do? And that you guys can work on that. Same with water and sewer. So those are the kinds of issues. Now, like I said, water is much further along than all the rest of them. There's probably a much more substantial updating or refreshing of that plan. But really, if you look at it, the plan and all plans are giving you a concept of what direction you want to go. So they're not exactly precise, and they're not always going to be accomplished in a certain timeline. But if you look at them over the long run, I think that you'll see in the last 20 years, we've accomplished a lot in comparison to the previous 20 years. And it's still where we can sit there and say, not a lot of things in this have been accomplished. So it's basically looking at refreshing and understanding that we're interested in a certain type of bike trail, and when we get the opportunity, we take advantage of it. So I don't think it's out of line to refresh it. I think we are in the process of it. You guys probably will get to work on it a lot more as we go forward. But I think understanding that there is a long-term goal, and that how you want to get there can change, but it's still that you have an intent to be bikeable is important. And so I think that we're headed in that direction now. We're just starting the preliminary conversations. Clearly, we wanted to start here before the city council, because that's been the question that we've been dealing with, is should be before the city council or before Public Works Board to make a recommendation. So that's what we did. And we even worked with Greg on having those conversations to make sure that they started here and moved through appropriately.
Decision time, eh?
Or some sort of motion. I mean, do you want this brought back at each meeting to chip away at it? That's the better approach. We're not going to rework a whole plan in one night.
Well, you definitely have an opportunity to see what Brandon and Dwayne are going to prepare for the comprehensive plan part. So, and that may stretch over several months based on their initial meeting and then going from there. So I would say, I don't know that we need to make any specific recommendation right now, but be prepared to see it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I just view these plans as wish lists. For,
what they are.
for proposals. I'm not attacking staff for proposing, but if there's no money, there's just no money. And there's other projects I'd rather do from the public works board perspective, like let's resolve that yard waste site.
Understood, and that's exactly why we wanted to bring it to you in this form, so that we don't start working on something that, you know, you don't want us to spend a lot of time on. On the other hand, we have a request that we want to make sure that we show some progress on. So if I can recap, what I'm hearing is that some type of inexpensive, like zero-cost internal review, and then bring it back for another round of discussion and see what we come up with. Kind of a wide-open topic right now, and then we'll try to narrow it down.
Yeah, start funneling.
Yep, exactly.
All right?
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So we'll move on to item 8, discussion and recommendation on wastewater treatment plant compliance, maintenance, annual report. This is usually,
right.
we get good news usually, so
Absolutely. So,
will we
Bill,
get good news again?
you can either sit, you want to just sit here and?
All right.
Yeah, 'cause I'm
Oh,
not-
we have a prepared motion. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve motion 22-6-1 to authorize the staff to submit the report to the council.
So moved. Mark?
Come on up here.
Is there a second from Lisa or Greg?
I'll second.
I was second from Lisa. All right.
Hello?
Are we ready?
Okay, so tonight I'm here to try to get a recommendation on the 2021 Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, or CMAR as we call it. And I guess I'll just go through it a little bit and explain that the report, for those that don't know, is required by Wisconsin Admin Code NR 208. And it requires all publicly owned treatment works to submit the CMAR annually on or before June 30th of each year. And it's intended to be an objective means for the DNR as well as city staff to evaluate the operation and performance of the treatment works and the collection system. The report is about 29 pages long this year, and that includes the grading summary and the resolution statement. The report is divided into 10 sections. And this year, I'm sure as you all saw, we got a pretty good report again. We got a 3.84 average out of 4.0. We had A's in 9 sections and 1 B in section 3, total suspended solids, and that was due to upset conditions we experienced back in February and March of 2021, and we experienced those same conditions this year at about the same time. So we're trying to pin that down and find out exactly what's going on, but it's a bit like taking your car to the mechanic when it's not broke. You know, you have to get lucky and find out what's going on. So I guess I can go through the report a little bit and talk about each section if you'd like me to. So section 1, influent flow and loading. If you take a look on that first page, there's a table, and you'll see that the flows were down quite a bit. Actually, we were down, influent flow was down probably about 170,000 gallons a day on average. So it was.
Is that strange?
Compared to the year before?
Yeah, compared to the year before, you bet. Yeah, I thought it was dry weather. We had really dry weather. I think they've probably, Paul and his water guys have taken care of some leaky mains, and we've taken care of
Oh,
maybe
okay.
some leaky sewer mains, and I think all those things come into play. Of course, I can tell you, when it rains, the flow still goes up. So, I mean, the problem's not solved, but it looked better. We never hit that 90% of design, which they kind of use as a benchmark. So all in all, that section looked pretty good. We did experience some settling problems and things that I discussed related to the upset. And we believe that's something coming into the plant in our influence. So we'll keep looking for that. Moving on to section 2, effluent BOD. Again, we had no exceedances for the BOD, but we were impacted a bit, by the upset as well. So we did have a little bit higher than normal BODs there for our effluent BOD, but nothing that put us over the limit. Section 3, effluent total suspended solids, that was our only B. That's with the upset, as I said, in February and March, we had foaming, which we believe is filamentous foaming. Bacteria that are undesirable are out competing those that are desirable due to a food source, I think. And it causes poor settling, and that's kind of what happened to us there. To resolve that, we mechanically removed the foam. We sucked it off the oxidation ditches with our vac truck. We added bioaugmentation, or effectively good bacteria that we want in there. And we did some further testing.
Can I ask a question on that section?
Yes.
Just in your notes there, Bill, you said, says the issue was caused by something in our influent that we don't directly control. Can you clarify, what does that mean?
Yeah, I don't directly control anything in my influence. It's kind of at the will of what other people put down the pipe. And so if somebody's putting something down the pipe that I don't want, I have to catch them doing that, or I don't have a lot of say-so over it. And so I guess that's what I meant. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay. So section 4, effluent ammonia. Again, we did great here. We didn't get anywhere near our limits. However, I did notice a slight uptrend. We averaged about a 0.158 versus 0.0599 or 0.06 the previous year. So our effluent ammonia trended up a little bit. Could be a lot of things. We could have, could be somewhat related to the upset. It could be that I guess I always get concerned with it because it means that we're losing nitrifying bacteria, and those are the hardest to replace and the first to go. So just kind of something to watch. We're far away from our limit. I think we have 6 different ammonia limits for the year, and they range from 1.6 to, I think, close to 10. And so we're nowhere near that limit, but we do pay per pound for everything we put into the stream, so we do watch it. Section 5, effluent phosphorus, kind of the same thing here. It seems like I was adding more alum or trying to treat more phosphorus and having a little bit harder luck doing it. 2021, we averaged about 0.832 milligrams per liter effluent phosphorus. In 21, we had 0.647 milligrams per liter average. So again, it kind of trended up a little, or it seemed like it was a little bit harder to get the phosphorus out. And I guess to touch on it, in April of 2024, our limit will drop to 0.8. So we do have a multi-discharger variance, and I believe we just pay per pound for anything that we're over that 0.8 limit, but something to be aware of. Moving on to section 6, biosolids management. It actually went pretty good because we had a dry year. But like always, we're dealing with coordinating with the farmers and the landowners and, you know, the hauler as well, when they can come. Everybody's screaming at them in the spring and the fall to get out there and get the sludge hauled, so we kind of have to get in line. But it went pretty well last year with a dry year.
Can I ask a question here?
Yep.
Did we haul sludge to two locations, two primary things, the approved sites and another site?
Well, what happened is we hauled sludge to some of our approved sites, and then our hauler has sites that are under their permit. And so when I discharge to their sites, I have to file a form for other methods of disposal.
Okay.
So it doesn't go on our site as if we land applied. It goes, our hauler claims it as he applied it, but I do have to account for the sludge. The other thing is we cleaned out one of two oxidation ditches. And so all the grit / sludge that comes out of there gets reported on that as well. That's why you saw multiple.
And the haulers disposal on their sites, that's a pretty common amount?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
All right, thanks.
You bet. Moving on to section 7, staffing and preventive maintenance. We got an A here as well. It looks really good on paper. As Paul kind of segued to, we've had some staffing challenges. It was actually a little better in 21 until the end of the year. We lost an employee. Actually, we were all affected by the pandemic, and I was pretty sick. I want to give big shout out to the other 3. Only I guess one of the guys is left with us, but they came in sick. They said they didn't feel as bad. They kind of stayed away from everybody else. We locked the gate, and they did what needed to be done, and I think that really says something about the crew. And they kind of bailed us out. Otherwise, we would have been in a bad strait to run the treatment plant without people that knew what they were doing. So that was a good thing. In the end of the year, we did lose one guy, and one employee was hurt. That was me. So I was off. I hurt myself at home, not at work. So, but I was off for a while with that. And I guess this year now we're down to just Ken and I, and that's been tough. It leaves us kind of in a bad spot, and hopefully we can attract a qualified replacement and get somebody in here to help us out. Moving on to section 8, operator certification. During the pandemic, so I guess on my last year's report, I told you we had a little bit of problem with classes and finding things available and testing. There just wasn't anything. That's gotten better. We now have classes, and they're holding in-person classes, so it's been better. They changed the testing. I guess we'll have to figure that out, how we do that. It's all remote now, but it shouldn't be a big deal. So right now I'm meeting the requirements I need to meet, and we don't have a big problem there. Section 9, financial management. This is a section that Betsy used to fill out for us, and I never worried a lot about it because she just always had it covered. Sam took care of that this year, and I think even Dwayne helped us out a little bit with some of his CIP numbers. And it looks pretty good to me. I'm not an accounting person, but it looks like all the money's in there that's supposed to be in there, and we're financially where we need to be. If you look at page 18, under 4.1, it says future planning, and I think you'll see project 4 there. The estimated cost is $50 million, and that would be the estimated cost at this time to move the treatment plant and the discharge. And that's up from the previous report a year ago when we kind of were looking more at trying to revamp it or sink more into the current site. It was about 15 million. And I guess some of the reasons, as we all know, but I'll say it for any public that's watching, that you might want to build a new treatment plant versus rehab the one we have, is that the permit compliance effectively. The limits have become so stringent that with the small creek we're on, it'll be hard to meet those limits. And also, the city is growing, and you're gonna have a lot of sunken value into a site that's very, very small, and if there's growth in the future, you might not meet your needs. So hopefully we can, I'm sure we'll have more information for you later on that, maybe in July or something. But moving on to section 10, sanitary sewer collection system. This is where we address the backups, the spills, our collection system goals, and what we'd like to do for maintenance out there. And in 2021, we did have a contractor working in the city that caused a spill or a SSO, sanitary sewer overflow. They took a manhole out and didn't make any kind of bypass. They just let the sewage flow through the trench. So that the sewage was all contained. It's kind of an old school way people used to do things. And by the time we found out about it, it had already occurred and been filled in. But we reported it. The public was never at risk from the spill, but it occurred. So it's noted on here. We had about 8 complaints. That was the same as 2020 report. And we had 2 backups that counted. We get several backups a year, but the DNR has criteria for what they consider a backup. If it's in our pipe or we caused it, then that's one of our backups. If it's in your home drain, that's not our backup. And as far as our goals go for the collection system, we achieved several of them. We fell a bit short on others. I guess sewer root removal, manhole inspections, and lift station O&M visits, mainline rehabilitation, I was a bit short on. But we far exceeded our goal for sewer televising and manhole rehabilitation. So overall, we did pretty good. So I guess looking back at the report, I mean, grade-wise, it's pretty good. But it feels like it was kind of a difficult year. It feels like it was a bit stressful. It wasn't just our normal year when we think about how we lived it there at the treatment plant. But it looks good on paper, so I'm pretty happy with it, I guess. I don't know if you have any questions for me or.
I don't have questions. Do you, Mark?
Nope.
Do you, Lisa?
I'd just like to personally say thanks to you, Bill, and your team. It sounds like you guys are pretty strained staffing wise, and the pandemic, has been a challenge in many ways. So I know it can be frustrating not to be able to achieve all the goals that you had for yourselves, but given, the circumstances, just thank you for keeping things moving.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Greg? Is he still on? If you're talking, Greg, we can't hear you. Okay, how's that going to work if we do the vote? So, Misty, you did get the motion to approve the motion, right?
Yes, I had a motion and a second for
Yeah.
this with Mr. Picard and Ms. Curler.
Greg, all right, I think I just heard you, Greg, right? Okay.
Yes, what I did say was thank you for doing a great job under difficult
Yeah.
circumstances.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'll let the guys know.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote on the motion, and I recommend voting yes, because if we say no, Bill's got to do this report all over again. So let's do the roll call vote, Misty.
Mr. Polachek,
Yes,
Mr.
aye.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Templey,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
motion passed 4-0.
All right, agenda item number 9, recommendations for future agendas. I don't have any. Do you have anything, Mark?
Nope.
Do you, Greg or Lisa? All right, the staff?
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I exercise dictatorial powers and suspend the rules.
Thanks, Todd. I apologize making public comment at the end of the meeting, but I actually took a phone call as I was walking up to the meeting, and it was about city business. And it was a citizen that was expressing gratitude for the city's work in the last couple days after we got hit by the storm.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to express thank you to everyone in the Public Works Department throughout the city. I know it was a trying 24 hours at this point, but a lot of long hours being put in. But thank you for the excellent job. The trees are getting cleared, the power lines are back up, and very much appreciated. Also, I wanted to thank the Public Works Board for their community service and supporting the community with their work and their diligence of reviewing topics. And in fact, all of our city boards need to get this type of approval, but thank you for the work that you do. All right, any questions for me?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I will be more than happy to pass that along to some really tired people. Thank you for mentioning that. I do have a couple of items, if I may, for next month specifically. They are big items. Number one is the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. We'll be presenting that to you. And then kind of following on the heels of Bill's presentation, we have been doing some work on the new plant, or some planning, I should say. And one of the things that we want to look at is a different process for the effluent, the sludge, that sort of thing. And so we would like to dedicate a substantial part of the July meeting to explaining a new process, one that may have some merit, but before we move too far with it, we want to, really have you guys take a close, hard look at it and just see if it's a path we want to go down. So we anticipate that will be a lengthy discussion, presentation and discussion. And Greg, we would certainly want to invite as many city council members to view that too. I wouldn't say that it's, earth-shattering or completely drastic, but what we've seen so far is very encouraging, and it may have some merit. And I don't want to taint the discussion by giving you all my opinions, but I think it's worth talking about.
All right. So I'm gonna be gone in July, but if you said there's gonna be a presentation.
Yes, and of
Okay.
course it'll be videotaped and
All
everything.
right, so I'll just look at it and send you emails. I think I got your email address, don't I?
If you don't, you're one of the few that does.
Right. All right. I guess if no other recommendation of future agendas, I'll adjourn the meeting.